L'Esprit d'Escalier, Portals and Stairscapes, 1920-2020. I would like to warmly thank the Urban Humanities Initiative for welcoming this creative project on the campus of UCLA. My name is Cécile Guédon, and I'm an assistant professor in French and Francophone studies and in European languages and transcultural studies. I am thrilled to present today just a small sample of our teaching and research activities during this portal year of 2019-2020, my first at UCLA. Today, however, I want to talk almost exclusively about staircases. Let me start with an anecdote. French Enlightenment philosopher Denis Diderot was once invited to a dinner with influential statesman Necker and other brilliant conversationalists. A friend of his teased him in front of everyone attending, and he couldn't think of anything appropriate to say. Hours later, he finally came up with a funny line as he left the mansion and walked down the stairs. In colloquial French, the phrase l'esprit d'escalier refers to that experience, which is often translated as staircase with or trappendes. L'esprit d'escalier thus lingers in time and limps in space. It portrays a subject caught in the cobwebs of a delayed cognition and stunted by emotional trails. As Diderot makes comically explicit, the staircase as a mechanical paradigm provides a rhythmical, abstract, and choreographic experience at once, whereby one loses her mind and only comes back to her senses as she reaches the bottom. Il perd la tête, he loses his mind, et ne se retrouve qu'au bas de l'escalier, and only finds it back at the bottom of the stairs. The ascending and descending patterns of the climbing up and down can be indeed thought of as experiences of deprivation. In the instant of climbing the stairs, one is directly confronted with the inescapable fact that one is neither up nor down, but caught in suspension in a mostly uneven binary structure, a sort of lopsidedness which rests on the alternation of the left foot with the right foot in a constant play on asymmetry. This experience neatly captures my first year at UCLA, where I first and foremost attempted to find my footing within multiple, vibrant, and yet scattered communities. Throughout the year, finding my bearing has meant seeking and weaving threads of belonging in a syncopated fashion. Let me give you some important moments from that timeline. First, in April 2019, as I was standing atop the stairs in Murphy Hall, now on the tenure-track ladder, and poised before a meeting with Dean Skaberg about the future of undergraduate education, I came across a brochure showcasing the work of EPIC, or Excellence in Pedagogy and Innovative Classrooms. I eagerly signed up for forthcoming workshops and events, and I was fortunate to soon receive the opportunity to teach for the summer session of the AAP, or Academic Advancement Program, now renamed John Huggins Jr. and Apprentice Bunchy Carter Program after the two leaders of the Black Panthers LA chapter who were murdered on campus in Campbell Hall on January 17, 1969. Starting in August 2019, a fresh newcomer myself, I spent 6 weeks meeting every day with 22 incoming freshmen from Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, as well as first generation and low-income backgrounds. As we discussed the nuts and bolts of literary theory, with the whimsical likes of Virginia Woolf, Roland Barthes, and Michel Foucault, we established a tight sense of belonging. Our everyday conversations focused on gender, class, and race. They took us beyond our classroom in Rough Hall. We went to see John Singleton's retrospective at the Hammer Museum, watching Boys in the Hood from 1991 and Poetic Justice from 1993, and this was, effectively, our very best introduction to Los Angeles' racial, social, and urban recent history. We went to see the books of Beast best theories in the medieval world at the Getty Museum. We explored the Bocheslack archives of early manuscripts and late fanzines at the Young Research Library. As much as the students were finding community amongst their peers, we were all establishing networks of care, support, and camaraderie, as this brand new, shall I say centennial cohort, was getting ready for its first quarter in the fall of 2019. In January 2020, I found again this expanded sense of belonging thanks to the Daily Bruin, whose writers contacted me to reflect on the radically innovative work of translation by a colleague from the English department, Brian Kim Stephens. A non-native speaker of French, my colleague chose to work prominently on the musicality of Arthur Rimbaud's visionary poetic prose, Les Illuminations from 1875. This non-orthodox approach greatly resonated with my own research on late 19th, early 20th century European poetry. I was so thrilled to gather doctoral students in February around the world-acclaimed choreographic piece entitled The Four Quartets, premiering in Los Angeles at the Center for the Arts and Performance at UCLA, thanks to the diligent care of Meryl Friedman. A few months later, the doctoral seminar I offered for the newly forming department ELTS was entitled Poetry in Flex, Dance Afoot, and it drew from the modernist poetic canon in 4 languages, inciting the very same students who attended the choreographic staging of T.S. Eliot's literary quartets to work on the visual, musical, and performative dimension of experimental poetry in French, English, German, and Italian. But let me resume my staircase rumination. As a spatial construct, a set of stairs offers fascinating paradoxes with stark abstract properties. In my research, I aim to show that after 1920, European staircases gradually became conceptual devices. In fact, I argue that they often operated as appropriate stand-ins for modernist works, either black and white minimalist grids, fragmented human outlines, or syncopated jazz pieces. What happened on the edge of the grid, on the brim of a step? The signs of dynamic engagement with a grid-like black and white minimalist aesthetic seem to appear most persuasively in the intervals of a handful of modernist staircases in interwar Europe. By using the staircase as a spatial construct, but also as a heuristic model, I thus make a formal claim about artistic abstraction, and more specifically about its embodied, intermedial, and kinesthetic nature. But I also aim to anchor my reflection in a neatly bounded historical time frame, spanning the end of the 19th century until the middle of the 20th century, when continental chaos and fragmented socio-political bodies ruptured the fabric of the European identity as a social democracy. Concurrently, the period of high modernism is the time where practices of abstraction rose to prominence across a wide spectrum of artistic expression. This sharp unease, born out of a sense of global crisis in the 1920s, took a topical relief of urgency as I participated on March 9th and 10th to the UCLA Experimental Humanities Workshop entitled Humane Infrastructures. My intention then, as a presenter, was to call for a cross-campus collaboration with interested colleagues so as to design a large course entitled Catastrophes, Narratives of Extinction, approaching natural and man-made disasters from an environmental, medical, urban, digital, but also philosophical and artistic perspective. This, I imagine, would be a strong showcasing of a transhistorical and transcultural strength from the newly established Department ELTS in the years to come. However, my sketched-out project found a quick translation in response to Dean Skaberg's call for Fiat Lux seminars addressing the Covid-19 crisis. And just a week later, I found myself offering Occurs Hello, a 10-week seminar centering on 3 natural disasters across time and space, asking from students to engage in think tank-like discussions, drawing lessons from the far past to formulate actionable steps in our chaotic present. As a course project, the students offered their conclusions from catastrophes present and past and made their final recommendations to be historians of our remote future, investigating the current pandemic and the rising calls for social justice. It is their voices that can be heard today in the Digital Salon Podcasting, a multimedia program addressing the COVID-19 portal, as Indian novelist Arundhati Roy called it, hosted by the Urban Humanities Initiative at UCLA. First, Fernando Lupian ponders about the risks of being an essential worker as he feels the fear from others and for himself. Jonathan Su weighs on the jarring economic and social disparities made visible by the pandemic and the lack of affordable healthcare for the most severely hit communities. Nicholas Sung reflects on the involvement of sports federations on campus and more broadly in our social fabric as a whole, and their critical role in shaping local, non-partisan collectivities. Every book tackles the incandescent topic of communal living, COVIDly, that is by urgent choice or cautious necessity. She meaningfully brings in a mirror-like reflection to of a roommate's experience of close bonding during the pandemic. To summarize, walking through the portal of my first year at UCLA has meant translating ever-forming and ever-questioned bodies of knowledge from old platforms to new media, while leaping from budding sciences to new viruses, jumping from weekly classroom contact to the murky intimacy of screens, and maintaining at each and every bold step deep empathy and keen intellectual vigor. And still, for all those calisthenics, we could not keep our students' lives, nor our own, from being continuously and dramatically altered. I am now poised in mid-air myself, ready to pass on the mic to our 4 participants. Many thanks to Fernando Lupian, Jonathan Su, Nicholas Sung, and Every Book Out for offering their minds and their hearts as COVID-19 echo chambers. And to you, friendly listener of our remote future.
Hello, my name is Fernando Lupian, and I am a rising second-year political science and comparative literature major. I'm also planning to minor in public affairs. And one of the key lessons I want future historians to take away from this pandemic is that there needs to be more tests done on the psychological nature of human beings, more specifically on their reaction to fear. This is why in my proposal, I would like to consider the theme of psychology by evaluating essential workers and consumers during the COVID-19 pandemic. As an essential worker myself, I have been able to step out the role. I have been able to step out of the role of an essential worker and change so that I'm a psychologist in a way by observing the behavior of our customers. And I have to say, it has been really interesting to see how people react to fear. It almost seems that fear overtakes one's rational capabilities and makes one do things without thought. This irrational thinking reminds me of Thomas Hobbes' assertion in Leviathan that in the state of nature, people will do anything it takes to survive because humans are selfish creatures. And in a way, Hobbes' psychological and social analysis is valid today because people are hoarding up on supplies without taking into account the need of others. All that is in the back of their heads is their own survival and not that of others. And for future researchers, I encourage them to create more tests on the psyche of the people and to see how they react to fear. And for future politicians, I encourage them to develop more plans that will better prepare their countries for catastrophe and not have people fear over their lives.
My name is Jonathan. I'm a 4th-year psychology major. As we have seen throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, there are increasing health disparities within our health system. In Chicago, communities of color, especially African Americans, account for nearly 72% of COVID-19 deaths, while only representing 32% of the population. The high rates of pre-existing conditions within communities of color, like high rates of obesity, asthma, heart disease, and diabetes, have put people of color at a higher risk of death from the infections of COVID-19. Low-income communities, which have poor or no access to health insurance, are affected the most. In rural areas where there are limited access to affordable, low-cost, and high-quality healthcare services like COVID-19 testing and ventilators are examples of these health disparities. Although the prevailing narrative that COVID-19 has affected everybody regardless of race, culture, or income is true, COVID-19, it has disproportionately affected communities of color and low-income communities with historical high rates of health disparities. Future leaders must use COVID-19 as a case study to investigate who is affected the most. We must expand health insurance coverage, improve the capacity and number of providers in underserved communities, teach providers about cultural differences, and increase the knowledge of intervention and causes.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Sung. I am a third year molecular cell and developmental biology major. And as we continue to come to terms with the new normal brought about by the current pandemic, one topic that should be further explored is how sports will evolve to fit the world we now live in. America in particular has seen its citizens divided by politics and other issues throughout history. Yet at the end of the day, sports competitions have always served as a neutral zone where people can set aside their differences and rally behind local athletes. When social distancing was implemented to combat COVID-19, sports, for the most part, were shut down due to public health concerns. Thus, a portal was opened to a starkly different world where major sporting events have all but vanished. As a result, businesses have suffered financial losses, friendships built around sports have become dormant, and different-minded people who would normally set aside their differences in the name of sports have once again begun quarreling. While sports are not essential work by any means, it is important to acknowledge the important role they play in bringing people together. With this in mind, one way we can address the future of sports in the current and post-pandemic world is to create a discussion around the topic by interviewing executives, athletes, and other relevant individuals about their opinions on the matter.
My name's Avery. I'm a senior at UCLA and an English major. A friend of mine named Cassidy spent a month and a half of quarantine living with her ex-girlfriend without the comfort of being able to be in a different space. She had to move in with a friend in the middle of the safer-at-home order, which brought her relief and then both a sense of friendship. I have another friend named Julie who lives with her sister and has felt her mind grow during this time of protest and racial violence. From talking to my friends about how their relationships have shifted during this time, I've come to discover that even though being together this much is not the norm, the relationship a person has with the people they live with is an integral shaping factor of their mindset. All of this is to say that people need each other to grow and learn. But because many people have the technology to connect with others without being in close proximity, we don't need to be afraid of breaking from the norm or be so quick to go back to what was normal. The preciousness of these relationships show that human life is the most important non-renewable resource we have, and it should be treated this way. So when you hear that there's a deadly virus with no cure, believe in the resilience of humans and our ability to adapt to new situations.
My name is Cassidy.
My name's Julie.
Hi. I live with my friend Lindsay. So before the safer-at-home order, we actually didn't live together. I was still living with my ex. And beforehand, we were really good friends, but we would only connect every once in a while. So living together has, I think, really strengthened our friendship. And I think it's also given us both the opportunity to remind ourselves why we are such good friends in the first place and all the things that we love about each other.
Yeah, I think we are good at listening to each other and being able to vocalize how we feel. And I think when I think about our relationship and what I'm guessing is like how it's different because shelter in place, I feel like it's more because of the like health and political and cultural things happening that have happened during shelter in place and not necessarily due to living and being confined at home.